Okay, I'm gonna ask you the questions. Okay, Mom. You ready?
Yeah.
If you don't mind, you just tell us a little bit about Bud, Jack, and Wilfred.
Yeah. So Bud, Jack, and Wilfred were my grandmother's brothers. So when the war came along, three of them were drafted. When I was little, we didn't hear much about their lives other than the fact of the time that they spent in the war and that Wilfred was killed.
When you explained, or at least when you tried to explain this to people that didn't have a background in the military, either I'm joining the military, what was their reaction to that?
I mean, my family was both happy, and it seemed natural to them in a way because we had so many family members that were either in the military or police officers. But I don't think they ever contemplated that, that I would actually have to go to a war zone. At the time that I joined, the military was really short-staffed in the medical field, so they were offering, a pretty lucrative financial bonus to join. So when I showed your dad the email that was like from the recruiting center to the medical school, he said, do it. Right? But I kind of showed it to him as a joke. We have 3 kids and we're both in school. Here's a solution, but I meant to present it as, here's a ridiculous solution. Then there was 4 of you at home, and so in my mind it's like I'm going to be gone for 6 to 8 months, and I have to also look after, the kids are in school and what is it they're going to need for an entire season without me. So it never really became a reality until I got on the bus, and then there was nobody, right? There was no 4 kids, there was no husband, there was no parents and aunts and uncles, and you feeling the need to always reassure them that nothing bad is going to happen. And then you're just there. And then it just becomes an exercise of distraction, constant distraction. So you don't think about what it is that you've left behind.
What was people's reaction when you told them, I have to go to Afghanistan? I remember one reaction I remember I said, what if you don't come back? And you said, of course I'm going to come back. Why would you even ask that? Dumb question. Right?
You naively think that there is no risk to your life or your well-being. The forward operating bases were targets for the Taliban, so they would routinely shell you with rocket-propelled grenades. Sometimes it would just be 1 or 2. I think the worst, we had a day where there was 9 pretty much in a row. I'm here because I was never there in the moment. It would be right beside me, like an RPG would hit the tent right beside me, and it was there, it was not here. It wasn't me.
I can't even, regular people, you talk about shell landing 2 tents over, a tent over, or whatever, but I would think that most regular people can't even understand what that even sounds like.
If I'm walking down Bloor Street and there's a loud crash or a car backfires, or your first thought always goes to that experience. The neurons in your brain are rewired. So when I look back to thinking of my uncles and what life would have been like post-war of that magnitude. So I imagine, I think of how I feel, then you think of how maybe Bud or Jack would have felt coming back from World War II. You cannot go back to resume normal life, because I don't think I've gone back to resuming normal life. It changes who you are forever. in our houses, on our couches, and we watch the war in the Ukraine. They don't get to go back to the Ukraine the way it was before the war. I think on an individual level, you are not the same person as you were when you left, and you won't be. And you come back, and the people around you are expecting you to return to what you were before you left. And you can't, but you really want to for them. Because if you could, it would somehow erase the things that you witnessed. Combat engineers would go out on patrol. They would have really close calls with improvised explosive devices, and they would come back in, and you would patch them up and decide from that moment on, are they fitful duties? And they come to you and they're scared. And they have wives and parents and kids at home. And you have no choice, if they're well, to make them fitful duties, to do the same thing the next day. And sometimes you make them fitful duties and they don't come back. Right? So that's a burden. Right? Like, that's a burden on your heart. And you don't want to put the burden of what you saw onto the people that you love. You don't want them to experience what you experienced, right? You don't want them to carry that with them.
This is the last thing, and I promise this is the last thing. I believe you've already read this, but I'm just gonna read it. Great Uncle Dennis said this to me. This was like the thing that I held on to the most. It says, "It is a privilege to have the opportunity of sending you the operational wings and certificate in recognition of the gallant services rendered by your son, Sergeant W. J. Radigan. I realize there is little which may be said to lessen your sorrow, but it is my hope that these wings will be a treasured memento of a young life offered in defense of his home and country." But when you read something like that, how can you not feel some sort of way for the people like you and like Randy and Cam and all those people? So that's it. We're done.
Oh, you're a good kid. You just gotta stop poking your nose into things where they shouldn't be.